All right, everybody. Hi, I'm Jason. I'm here with Marcelo Bentivoglio. He is out of Brazil. He is one of the founders of QI Tech. It's a fintech company that is really doing incredible things in Brazil. This series of live streams is supporting our summits. We have a fintech summit coming up in March where we have 20 thought leaders. Marcelo is one of the speakers. So welcome, Marcelo.
Hi, Jay. Thank you for inviting me.
So for people who are listening, this series is going to be called Clearly Explained. And what we're going to do is dive into aspects of fintechs and really try to explain it to the rest of the world, to other fintech thought leaders in case you want to partner. Fintechs is a huge space. The last year, 2021, I don't know the total number in terms of billions of dollars raised, but it was an amazing year for fintech. And I think QI Tech is one of the companies that you definitely want to learn from. And Marcelo is someone who explains things clearly. So I really enjoy having him on this episode. So to start off, Marcelo, maybe we could just talk briefly about your journey as a founder. For people who are listening, I think they like that personal aspect. So how long have you been involved in financial services in Brazil?
Okay. Pretty much my entire professional life. I started my career in 2011 at Goldman Sachs. I was a sales trader for the electronic trading desk. Then I moved as a consultant for financial services as well. At some point in 2015, I decided to start my first fintech. We created a fully online platform which SMEs could fund their open and unpaid invoices. I run that company from 2015 to 2019. At the point, I decided to sell the company, and instead of providing credit, I started building infrastructure for other entrepreneurs to provide credits for final customers. So I basically changed the mindset and founded my second fintech company.
Wow. So I think that the background is amazing because the journey you've been on, you've really seen the traditional way of doing things. And you also are familiar a bit for people who are listening with the economics, it's kind of the economic structure of Brazil. So very briefly, to give context to sort of why QI Tech is important and why it's really, changing things there. What's the background of sort of how big is the economy of Brazil? How many people? And then we'll talk secondly about the banking situation there. But how many people are in Brazil, and approximately how much GDP does it have?
Okay, so we are talking about trillion Brazilian reais. GDP would be 400 billion dollars, and we are talking about a country with 200 million people. So we are a huge country. We have a lot of people, and we are early adopters to new technology. So almost 80% of our population already work it or have a smartphone on their pockets.
Yeah,
And
I'm just going to jump in for a second. I mean, just to clarify that statistic, it's 212, almost 213 million people, as you said, and
yeah,
1.45, according to the latest GDP statistics, US dollars, trillion US dollar GDP.
oh yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, 1.4 trillion dollars. Yeah.
It's huge. It's a very significant economy with 200 million plus people there. So, really interesting. Now, as far as before we talk about QI Tech, and we're going to talk today specifically about buy now, pay later, which is something a lot of people want to learn more about. So what is before you created QI Tech, you were telling me on, one of our chats earlier that there are essentially 5 banking institutions in Brazil that have been doing it for a really long time. And they sort of kind of captured the banking activity, if you will. So could you share a little bit about like kind of what the situation sort of has been in Brazil, for a long time?
Yeah. Okay. So Brazil is a very typical country in terms of financial services. We actually have a kind of managed oligopoly because The top 5 banks concentrate almost 90% of the credit market. That is good in one sense because you have a very controlled financial system with very low systemic risk. So we don't have big risks of having a financial system crash, right? But in the other hand, it's really bad for the population because you don't have enough incentive for banks to lower the price to get better user experiences. So they kind of accommodate on their position because they're big and they make a lot of money. And for the country as a whole, the central bank is very active in trying to get more competition in the market. So it started out in 2013 when the central bank issued 2 new licenses for payments institutions. And after a couple of years, the central bank issued 2 more licenses for direct lending and for peer-to-peer lending in 2018. And actually, QI Tech was the first direct lending company approved by the central bank in 2018.
So I want to break this down. I think this is a really amazing story, and I think for people around the world, they would love to understand more about this. You have a country with 200 million plus people, almost 1.5 trillion US dollars of gross domestic product of economic activity, and really 5 banks are doing 90% of the credit, activity there. So if you want to borrow money as a small business owner, you're just limited to those 5 banks. And if you want to, even as a consumer, if you want to purchase something, you're sort of limited to those 5 banks. What they want, the rate that they want to make changes is the rate with which a lot of other, economic activity change. And the issue is they don't really have a strong incentive to change because they already dominate. So why change? They have good, a good business model. So in 2018, the central sort of system, if you will, central bank and the central, government of Brazil said, let's innovate. And they opened the door to having innovation. And QI Tech is the first organization that got the license to operate as a kind of an innovative financial services institution. So we're gonna talk briefly now about what actually QI Tech does and provides, and then we're gonna get into the buy now, pay later as a sub aspect of that. So what is actually, you mentioned to me banking as a service, credit as a service, and lending as a service, right? So. Yeah. So we can break that down, but before we do that, like if you were to say QI Tech in like 1 or 2 sentences, Marcelo, what would you say QI Tech? What is QI Tech and about? In like just as a 2-sentence sort of summary, QI Tech, how would you put it?
Okay, so we are a bank infrastructure that allows other companies to create and provide financial service to final customers. So think of us as a Rails, which you can build your own experience for your own customers when you want to create financial services experiences. So we basically translated a banking license into lines of code.
You translated a banking license into lines of code.
Yeah.
I love it. So essentially, the way that if there's a company out there who wants to innovate and provide, for example, buy now, pay later, or provide a new way to rent furniture, or a new way to rent a car, or a new way to even make a deposit on a house or anything, right? Like, or even do an employment loan. We have talked about that before, like why employers have a lot of incentive to really help their employees borrow money and feel more stable in their job instead of having to say leave their job, go somewhere else. So there's a lot of applications out there. And the critical point is, you already have the license from Brazil. So all these companies, they don't have to go through the long process of applying for that license all over again, which is a huge amount of energy, time, and may or may not even be approved. And then secondly, once and even if you get the license, there's a lot of maintenance involved, right? To maintain the license over time, a lot of reporting requirements. You're taking care of all of that, and more than that, you're actually helping the companies to develop applications much more quickly. So they not only have that license that they can tie into, but you actually provide them with the infrastructure, lines of code, as you said. You took the banking license and turned it into lines of code. So let's dive into. You mentioned very briefly. You mentioned the three different types of things that QI Tech helps people with. So walk me through the three ways that QI Tech, the three types of things that QI Tech enables, Marcelo.
Okay, so the first one is credit as a service. And when we talk about credit, we talk about the very sense of the word. I mean, when providing credit for someone, usually you need to verify the customer, verify the data, have a risk assessment running. So when we talk about credit as a service, we are talking about QIC, know your customer, anti-money laundering process, onboarding, all this kind of feature that helps our customers to validate identity and also to help them to create risk models in order to decide whether or not they should give credit a line for those customers. So the first model is credit as a service.
So let's pause there for a minute. So let's say that somebody is an e-commerce company, right? Somebody owns an e-commerce company, and in the past, if they want to provide credit to their best buyers, for example, they would have to wait until that buyer goes out and finds credit, essentially, on their own, and something like a credit card or some other type of lending system. And then that institution, the company that's giving them the credit card, is one of the five, possibly one of those five, banks that controls most everything there. So essentially, the e-commerce company is limited, very limited in their relationship with the customer in terms of helping that customer, purchase better and have the credit when they need it. So now through QI Tech, the e-commerce company could have gone through all that trouble to go get a banking license and do all the know your customer, document, verify the customer and all of that. But that's a lot of time and investment. But instead of that, that e-commerce company can integrate, or someone else could build an application for e-commerce companies. And now that e-commerce company can essentially plug right in and either use the third-party software that's built on top of QI Tech to enable people to get credit right at the point of checkout. So they literally could apply, if they want to upgrade or add something else or add some insurance on top or whatever, they could apply right away. We can talk about insurance, but basically they can get credit at the point of checkout if they want, right? So that's credit. That's one example of credit as a service. But credit as a service can be used in many different places. Like you could also have credit as a service between employers and employees. You could have credit as a service in other aspects. Now, you also mentioned lending as a service, right? So what is lending? What is the main difference, Marcelo, between lending as a service and credit as a service?
Perfect. Great question, because when we talk about the credit side, we are usually talking about data, verifying data or checking data or using data to come to a conclusion. But when talking about the lending as a service, we are talking about issuing loans. So in the first phase, you verify the customer. You make a risk assessment in order to decide to give the credit limit, right? On the second phase, you actually issue the loan. So you give credit, you deposit money to your customer, or you finish their checkout process, or you pay for their bill, or you give some upfront payment in any kind of situation, right? So When talking about the lending process, we are talking about the loans, issuing loans and providing the customer with the money. Usually, if you have like a personal loan, you can deposit the money to the customer account. But talking about buy now, pay later, usually you are finishing the checkout process for the customer.
All right, and then I think banking as a service, very briefly, that's where you can actually open a bank account for somebody. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. And transactions, transferring money from account to account, paying bank slips. So all the transactions that you can make using a bank account.
Like transferring funds or opening an account. Okay, great.
Yes.
All right, now we're going to dive into buy now, pay later. So first of all, for people who are not familiar with it, what is it? What is buy now, pay later?
It's pretty straightforward. You buy now, and then you have the option to pay later.
So why is it so? Why is it so? Like, why is it blowing up in such a huge way? Like, people already have credit cards, and why do they need this additional option?
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so buy now, pay later doesn't actually require a credit card. So for customers that actually don't have a credit card or they don't have enough limit on their credit card, buy now, pay later is probably the only option to buy with multiple installments, right? So for products that have a higher price, a higher ticket, the buy now pay later usually are the only option for closing those checkouts.
So really, there's the main thing is kind of, I think what you're also saying is that I want to buy something and my credit card company has certain information about me, but the e-commerce company or we can talk about other types of businesses too, buy now, pay later, maybe the rental company.
Yes.
They have different information because I have been purchasing from them in the past and so on, right? So they have more different kinds of information. And they also want to have their own independent option to build a long-term relationship with that customer beyond just being a place where the customer shops. So once they have the buy now, pay later relationship, it can also possibly change the value of that customer relationship. So what are the types of purchases? You mentioned higher ticket products, but what are the different types of purchases you're seeing where buy now, pay later is being used the most?
Yeah, buy now, pay later, usually for checkouts. So online shops, e-commerces, marketplaces, all online checkouts is one of the places, right? And that's is already a $1 trillion market around the world. But on the other side, you also have some physical experience with buy now, pay later. Let me complement on that. Sometimes when you have like some stores selling physical products and customers are actually going to the store to buy anything like a product or a service, you can have a tablet ready available for the customer to complete the buy now, pay later process as if the customers was buying online. So you have a tablet at the store, and then your customer can just complement their data, and it actually works exactly the same as is if the customer was at home buying the same product. So for a company like Brazil, that you have a lot of people that actually are unbanked, so or doesn't have a smartphone yet, or like these kind of customers that is entering into the financial system for the first time, buy now pay later can be their first door to the financial system. So it's kind of an inclusion.
Yeah, sorry, when you talked about Brazil and you said the unbanked, so can you talk briefly just about the situation of Brazil and how many people are sort of unbanked there?
Yeah, I don't remember the data, but I know it's a relevant portion of the population.
Okay.
And when talking about the unbanked, it's not only people that actually doesn't have a bank account, but they could have like a bank, a digital bank account, but they don't have any kind of service or product on that. So it's all prepaid bank accounts, right? If you have a card, you only can use if you have deposits on your account.
It
So
could be unbanked or underbanked. It's also like
yes,
those group of people that have minimal banking, but not really like access to more credit when they need it. And I looked it up just as we were having the chat now live, and I saw 35 million approximately unbanked. But those are sort of the kind of strictly unbanked. But then there's probably another large percent of people that are underbanked. But I think the other thing you're kind of alluding to is that in traditional times, there was a relationship between the buyer and seller, and maybe you would go to the same market and you'd see the same people and you'd buy your bread or you'd buy your cheese or you'd buy your materials to make your clothes or whatever. And that buyer-seller relationship, they would get to know each other. And as a result of that, they could extend credit. So it would be kind of like a piece of paper. They'd write down your name, write down how much you owe, and they would just keep track of that. And essentially, we've lost that relationship between the buyers and sellers because there's this kind of invisible, third party that's the credit card company, and there's no real connection as in terms of financial connection as much. So it sounds a little bit is in the sense that not only are you helping people that couldn't actually purchase right away with something they need, which is absolutely important. You're also helping people get into the credit stream, actually build up their credit. But there's this relationship aspect between the buyer and seller that you're kind of bringing back to life that used to be so important. So could you talk about let's talk briefly about for buy now, pay later. First, why is the relationship between the buyer and seller important in the buy now, pay later process?
okay. So first, usually the first thing that you must do in order to use a buy now pay later product is you have to identify yourself, right? As you just said, we kind of creating again this kind of relationship between the seller and the buyer, which the buyer and I know the seller. We have like a personal relationship, but that's not the reality, right? So when we see transactions going on, actually are two players that doesn't know each other. They don't know each other, right? So the first thing buy now pay later can help is this identifier issue. So like you don't need to create your account every time you go to a checkout, because when using a buy now pay later product, the buy now pay later company already knows you. So when you get to a store, you just need to log in and you don't need to sign up again. And that's actually a very helpful tool, because Jay, it's really annoying signing up for every platform every time. It's the same data. You don't change your personal data, right? It's your personal data, and having like intermediary here, it also helps with data protection and privacy, right? Because you have a trusted partner in the way. So this is something that I consider one of the most hidden value of the buy now pay later, identifying users, buyers, and sellers. And second, when we look for the data and the volumes around buy now pay later, we actually see that sellers are trying to avoid the fees of the credit card processors, because usually when dealing with a credit card, you have the payment processor, the receiver, the bank that issued issue the card. So you have at least 3 intermediaries in this transaction. And with buy now pay later, you actually have just one intermediary. So the fees are very are much lower, and you can translate that into discounts and lower prices for the final customers as well. So these two are the hidden benefits of the buy now pay later for
So the first one you're mentioning is that, like, actually it's the kind of the other side of what I was saying, is that a lot of people are coming in to the shop, they want to buy something and pay later, but they're actually not well known. So having an application provider that is able to store and already have pre-verified all the identity of that customer is a big help, and that saves the customer time and reduces friction. And then I think the second thing is that, as you said, like with QI Tech, they don't have to reapply for the banking license. And then third is that, again, this is something QI Tech also can provide, is the updated credit assessment, right, for each transaction. So essentially, the licensing is taken care of, the KYC, know your customer, is taken care of, the credit assessment is taken care of, and then the actual lending and the ability to track the payments, you're also enabling that. So is that correct? Am I describing it properly? Or maybe you want to walk me through, like, what are the different aspects of, if you will, from the beginning of the very moment when somebody comes to buy now, pay later, what are the different aspects of QI Tech that are involved all the way through to getting paid?
Yeah, you're correct. Know your customer, anti-fraud system. We have device scans to help identify the geolocalization of the customer. We have restricted lists of places that we identify as potential fraud. So there's a lot of different aspects on the verification process, and then the issuing process of the credit. So we issue the credit, we register the credit, and then we are responsible to provide the data for the central bank as well. And finally, we also can help with collections. So we can issue bank slips, we can use the PIX transactions here in Brazil to collect the installments back from the customers using WhatsApp, email, or any kind of communication system that your customer is already using. So yeah, we pretty much cover the end-to-end experience. So we consider ourselves as a one-stop shop for lending.
Awesome. So just to summarize what we talked about so far, first we discussed a little bit about your background, which I think is important because you were in the traditional banking system and you really understand how different types of credit decisions were made, and also how to analyze those types of decisions. And then you actually created a company, Marcelo, that allows people to fund their invoices, and sold that. And now you're providing technology that allows companies to provide banking as a service, credit assessment as a service, and actually provide the loan and collections as a service as well. And so as a result of that, the e-commerce or other types of businesses that want to provide that service, they don't have to go through all those steps. They can tie into QI Tech. And so QI Tech, just to kind of touch back on what actually QI Tech does, it's a set of APIs. Is that correct? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we have a dashboard and online app, and also APIs. Through the APIs, you can connect with us, use any kind of service. Through our dashboard, you can create your own decision tree models with a no-code platform, which you can just click and select a new rule and decide whether your tree must go further or not. And then you can use data from traditional bureaus or big data from the market, or also your own data. If you have an API that we can connect with, it's pretty easy to connect. So we could use your own transactional data in order to help to create these decision tree models.
So
So
a
that's
decision tree, for people who may not be familiar with it, is a way to make credit decisions, right, around the borrower, and you can plug in a traditional credit risk, scoring. You can also possibly plug in information about your own history with that customer, and then you can develop your own decision-making process. And then anti-fraud, is that something you put in the decision tree, or is that something that's actually separate from the decision tree, Marcelo?
Yeah, absolutely. You can create decision trees for any kind of decision you have to make. Anti-fraud, onboarding, know your customer, risk assessment, even for the disbursement process, you can create your decision tree, verifying the user's accounts, these kind of things. So yeah, pretty much for every decision you have to make during your experience.
What percent, from your perspective, kind of the last part of this live stream today, is what percent of companies do you feel right now have already taken advantage of the buy now pay later, and where do you see it going in the next few years?
Okay, very few so far. I believe there's a lot of market to go after. I believe you're going to see a lot of new niched versions of the buy now pay later, like rent now pay later, fly now pay later. So all these kind of niche markets are waiting for entrepreneurs to get it and go after it. In the end, having a niche market is a good start because you have more data about this user using this kind of product, right? So if you're dealing with renting, the kind of housing this customer is renting, right? And if you're dealing with flights, you know if this is a regular flighter or is someone that is just getting a flight for vacations, right? So I believe there's a lot of spaces in e-commerce in general. We starting to see buy now pay later in almost every checkout, but on all other the niches market, I believe there's a huge opportunity to go after.
Every time I talk with you, I'm excited about, every single time I talk with you, Marcelo, I have some idea pop in my mind about application that could be used. And, right now you're just focusing on Brazil, right? Though if somebody wants to contact you and build an application on top of QI Tech's, banking as a service, lending as a service, and credit assessment as a service, it's just right now you're focusing on Brazil, and Brazil is a big market, like 1.5 trillion US dollars. As you said, we said 35 million underbanked, plus actually that's unbanked, and then another group of people. That's a huge percent, by the way.
Yeah.
And really just a lot of different aspects of this that we haven't even touched on today, that we talked about a bit in the preparation for your speaker talk, which I really would love to have either you or one of your teammates back and dive into, which we didn't talk about today, which is the lending between the different parties like employers and their employees. So to wrap up buy now, pay later, what do you see in the next 2 to 3 years as far as, and I have one other question for you, which I'm going to ask you at the same time. Why is this good for society? Like someone's listening to this, they're going, why do we need more loans? Why do we need more credit? Why is this good for society? And where do you see it? Like, I'm going to ask that as a last kind of combined question. Where do you see it going in the next 2 to 3 years? And why is this a good thing for society, Marcelo?
Okay, so banking is necessary, right? But banks are not. So I remember Bill Gates said that, something like that, and that's very true. I mean, the banking relationship between people and between customers and sellers, buyers and sellers, this relationship is very needed. I mean, we need this kind of relationship, right? But we don't need banks anymore, and our my vision for the future is many different startups and fintechs are going to provide financial service for your customers, and that's because if you have an app and you already have a service for your customer, you already have a relationship with that customer. You already have transactional data with that customer. So you are the best, the best company in the market to make a risk assessment on your customer because you have more data, right? And that means lower fees, lower costs, more applications, more funds available. So it's pretty much good for everyone, right? If especially in a country like Brazil, which the basic interest rate is around 10% a year, any kind of credit is expensive. But having more competition and having more opportunities, we can keep the interest rate low.
So the critical thing is really let's not have we need that banking relationship, but there's a lot of different ways to make that relationship actually more efficient, less expensive, and essentially serve both parties instead of having to go through these kind of old channels that are not necessarily effective or helping people. And you see the buy now, pay later, and you see banking as a service, credit as a service, and lending as a service. Where do you see that growing in the next 2 years in Brazil? And excuse me 1 second, I'm going to turn off an alarm, but I'm still listening to you.
No problem. I truly believe that every company is going to have your own fintech or your own kind of fintech. I mean, if you have customers, any kind of customers, you can offer them financial service, right? Because any kind of relationship in the market requires money, right? So if any kind of if the nature of any commercial relationship is based on an exchange of value, on exchange of money, every company is able to provide a financial service. So for the next 2 years, we are going to see a lot of traditional companies starting their own fintech companies on energy, on utilities, on all those different kind of basic service and traditional products in the market.
Fascinating. Just to jump in, and the final kind of statistic that I think will leave people with, as you're listening to this, maybe you're wondering how much is buy now, pay later growing in Brazil specifically. I just was looking up some research that I'll share as a link. So it's in just 2021, it's expected to grow 69.4% over last year, and it's estimated to reach $3.2 trillion of buy now, pay later transactions in just Brazil alone in 2021. And you can imagine the estimates going out to 2028. We're talking something like 18 trillion, something like that. Massive numbers. Really, it's a transformation of economy. It's a transformation of how banking is done and how transactions are done. And oftentimes, as far as a societal good is concerned, people are going to save money. Actually, they're going to actually save money and make better financial decisions too. So both the shops as well as the consumers. So I think it's great. Thanks so much, Marcelo, for breaking down, what is buy now, pay later, how it works, who's using it, all the non-traditional applications of it, and how QI Tech is essentially providing the banking regulatory sort of layer as an API. As you said, we turn the bank into code. But also you're providing the decision-making, the decision tree, which is awesome because you're educating a lot of businesses that they actually have control over those types of decisions, how to think better about those decisions using the decision tree system, and also the way that you're helping them to innovate quickly. So thanks so much for being on the live stream today. I hope everyone who's listening enjoyed it. We're here to break things down clearly for you. I think Marcelo is really a good explainer. So I really appreciate you, Marcelo, coming on and sharing your perspective on QI Tech, Brazil, and fintechs and what's going on there. So thanks again, Marcelo.
Thank you, Jay. My pleasure.
And hopefully we'll have one of your colleagues, Emilio, on, who's focusing on the credit as a service part, right? That's what so that's going to be great. So we're going to reach out to him and see if he can come on and complement what you shared today. All right, everybody. Sure. Thanks so much. See you guys. And Marcelo's a speaker at the upcoming summit in March. So you'll get a lot more clarity from him coming up at that event. All right. Take care, everyone. See you at the next live stream coming up in a week from now. Mark it on your calendar. Bye.
Bye-bye, guys. Thank you.
And I'm going to end the broadcast.